Hello there. Yes, yes, we were gone, but we're back. And we don't really know what happened. But you know what? I figure we have so much fun when we have a conversation that we're just going to rock this boat. So, Stephen, I can't believe you hung with me all that time, but we are back. Thank you so much.
Oh, no problem, Kate. You're worth it. That's for darn sure. We were talking
Well,
about we were talking about how the Great Pyramid had a huge return on investment. Instead of
absolutely.
instead of telling us that the original builders knew pi or that it had some symbolic or religious meaning, the Great Pyramid was infrastructure and provide helped people in a tangible way. What a wonderful prospect that is, instead of being a grave or some symbolic thing to point to stars. So that's the direction of my research, that the Great Pyramid actually helped people in a tangible way.
Well, I don't think that they would have put that much effort into anything, right? Unless there was going to be a vast return on investment, because I know that it was sand and not a lot of activity really going on other than taking care of the rulers or whatever. But I just can't imagine expending all that energy, and had to be some treasure too, to to get something like that built. It's amazing.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense in the real world to do all of that. I mean, it's a monumental construction project just to put a pharaoh's body in and have that system fail miserably, or to tell us that they knew pi or that they knew math or whatever. My bicycle exhibits some pretty high math, if you will. So the design of it. But think about it. Here in the modern world, we could build a pyramid to tell people 10,000 years from now that we knew pi. It wouldn't cost over $50 billion, and we can do it. We can pile up a bunch of rocks and symbolically have it point to something. But the reason why we don't do that is it would be a very, very small return on investment for the cost. In other words, it would be stupid to do. That's why we don't do it. Well, it would be just as stupid in ancient times if the original builders had the purpose of telling us they knew pi as the reason they built the Great Pyramid. So I think that they built it to make it a functioning machine which pumped water. And my second book, the lost tech, it's called the Great Pyramid Prosperity Machine,
Yes.
talks about how the Great Pyramid was assembled to function as a water pump, and it gives a functional meaning to all the passages and chambers and features inside the Great Pyramid to pump water. It's a little bit technical, that book, but so is the
Oh, but
Great
it's
Pyramid.
wonderful.
Mhm.
What I like is that there are illustrations, and there's, you know, it's not to where the average person won't comprehend the design and methodologies that you're describing. And I think that what really helped me when you were showing the um, the lock system, because the lock system flowed upward as they were taking the blocks up, and I had such a hard concept with trying to understand how are they getting these up with a lock system. Well, there you go.
Hmm. Well,
Easy to
thank you.
understand and right there for you.
Yeah, the book has quite a few illustrations, and it is mostly very easy to understand the concepts and theory behind the assembly process. And also on our website at thepump.org, we
Yes.
have our video series which has generated a lot of interest. It's free to watch, and it depicts how every type of stone, including the largest stones that are the ceiling stones of the king's chamber, how those stones were moved and set in place, how the capstone was set in place, and everything else. So I hope people watch our video series to find out exactly what we're talking about.
I know that we, before we were so rudely interrupted discussing some of the answers to this question, but what people who just sit back and look, this is such a random thing to have developed such a powerful interest in. And it's not just an average bare interest. This is something that you have really taken to heart, something you have worked diligently on for years. You have, you've done a great job. I mean, your research has included traveling to Egypt, um,
Yes.
doing on-site research at the Giza Plateau. You have been writing articles and lecturing on the subject of the Great Pyramid for quite some time. You've done 2 full books on this. You've got the Pump Foundation going. What brought you so strongly into this? What was it that caught your attention and made you say, there is more to this? I know there is. I've got to find out.
Well, several things. First of all, the dismal failure of Egyptology to provide a demonstration that supports their stories about like a big ramp or precision stone cutting using just hand tools. That is, unworkable in the real world. I don't know hardly anybody that's older than the 8th grade, if you will, that's looked into it that believes they used strong back muscles to move 70-ton payloads up a big ramp. So that was one thing, but also the idea expressed by Edward Kunkel in his book about how the Great Pyramid was assembled. It seemed to be consistent with the direct physical evidence, and it's actually doable. And another thing, it gives honor and glory to the original builders. It heaps, glory that the original builders were geniuses, and that. So I that all of that really suits me anyway. A lot of people think, oh, it was ancient aliens, or the aliens had a magic wand and that type of thing. But if you say that the ancient aliens built the Great Pyramid, then you're also saying the original builders or the people in the Valley of the Nile weren't smart enough to build the Great Pyramid. But I think that those people were geniuses that had an important goal of creating infrastructure to provide prosperity in their world. And I think that the ancient technology of the Great Pyramid can be used in modern times to help our modern but very troubled world.
I agree with that, but how do you see that working out? How do you see that being applicable with real world standards now?
Oh, well, if you can pump water up cheaply, then you can use that water for a whole host of purposes. You can certainly irrigate farmland that wouldn't be profitable to irrigate if you had to buy expensive, fossil fuel powered water pumps, or if you had to use electricity, which is quite expensive for irrigation. So cheaply pumped water can also generate electricity, and that would be a very important use for the pumped water. Also, you could decentralize the energy production systems that we have today. It's very centralized, like nuclear power, hydroelectric dams, coal-fired power plants to generate electricity. all have their environmental impacts that are very disadvantaged to the environment. So, if you could decentralize the production of electricity, it would help in a big way. In other words, people could have enough electricity to suit their needs, but not have to pay every month an electric bill. That's the type of thing that Nikola Tesla was trying to do when he was trying to use his Tesla tower to, in effect, send power through that tower, around the world. So
Yes.
we are trying to be a humanitarian and environmental organization to redevelop this alternative method to generate electricity and to power heavy machinery and for irrigation. So it would be very applicable to the needs in modern day civilizations. Also, there are times and places that have too much water, if you will, and flooding and that type of thing. So this type of water pump can be used to alleviate flooding, but also pump water to where it's needed. A lot of times in the east, we're seeing a lot of floods, but in the west we have some very serious droughts. So if we could cheaply pump water, we could almost terraform our nation and put water where it's needed and take it away where there's too much of it. So there's a lot of applications for this type of water pump. Certainly there was in ancient Egypt a need for a huge water pump, and pumping water is a very important aspect of our modern day civilization.
Well, I find that to be true, especially when it comes to moving water away from areas where it's overwhelming. You know, I,
Yes,
I have I have seen the Gulf coastal United States just inundated by hurricane tides, and I understand that that's salt water, but you can purify that as well. But when you have the Midwest, which is just so susceptible to extreme flooding, if you had a methodology in place, that water would be immediately usable.
absolutely. That's true. It's similar to up in the Netherlands where they used windmills to
Mm-hmm.
reclaim land that to use for agriculture and that type of thing. The windmills often pumped water from the land and out into sea. So it's that type of thing. So there's a lot of applications. There's a lot of interest in redeveloping this unique water pumping system described in my second book. So again, there's so much interest. We did a tour to Egypt, which was really fun, and I enjoyed that. So there's certainly a lot going on here at the foundation. I hope people will check out our website, and if they have any questions, they can contact me through email or even through my Facebook page.
Well, I usually go through your Facebook page, but I
Mm-hmm.
cheat. I love just, oh yeah, there he is. But yeah, I really feel like that we have gotten a little bit away from the flow of the conversation due to the circumstances. And I don't want to feel like I am shortchanging you at all. But when we talked about, when we had our issue, we were talking about the void and about the fact that the pyramid is not truly set up for tombs. It's not really set up for enshrinement. There's not a lot of space allocated for that.
Oh, that's
It's
true. Yeah, that's true. I have just been back from Egypt and we went to the Valley of the Kings,
mm-hmm,
and every surface had hieroglyphics, pictographs, whatever you want to call them, images of gods on every single surface, the ceiling, walls, everywhere. but the Great Pyramid is devoid of any formal writings, inside or out. So there's a whole host of things that indicates it's not a tomb. Its design doesn't look like a tomb, and Egyptologists say, well, the original builders didn't really know what they were doing because they weren't very smart, so they had several changes of plans during the construction, and that's why the Great Pyramid tomb doesn't look like a tomb, but it is a tomb. And that's what Egyptologists say. It's strange. So no, it's not a tomb. So no, less and less people who research the Great Pyramid think it's a tomb than ever before. So it's interesting.
Well, it is interesting. And, I'm going to tell you that I have been doing what I do for a long time. I'm in my 8th year. And
Wow.
I know, right? I love it. But I have spoken to several Egyptologists. I have had conversations with several of the people from Ancient Aliens when we were at various um, conferences and such as that. And I have never, ever heard anyone say that there were no hieroglyphics on the Great Pyramid. I just assumed there were. And that is very bizarre for where it sits.
Well,
When you,
it's interesting that you would have that impression, but that impression is incorrect. You
yes,
understand what I'm saying?
I do.
So it's in effect somewhere along the line. I think that you were told or implied information that wasn't true. Egyptologists are really good at saying they'll on TV documentaries they'll show you King Tut's mask, his
I've seen
burial
it.
mask,
Yes, I've
and
seen
then
it
they'll
at
show,
the exhibits.
yeah, and then they'll show you the pyramid. So they try to associate those two things. But King Tut wasn't buried anywhere near a pyramid at all. He was buried in the Valley of the Kings. He was buried in a hole in the ground. So it has nothing to do with pyramids. But
Isn't that interesting?
yeah, yeah, he's just buried in a hole in the ground. They dug a hole and put him in there with all the other kings in that area. Nothing to do with any pyramid at all. Didn't, so yeah, Egyptology does a lot of shucking and jiving with the truth, if you will, bait and switch. They'll show you King Tut's mummy, and then the next image they show you is the pyramid. So it's strange. And then what?
Fabrication is implied.
Yeah, the result is people, including you, get, they see all the writings on the Valley of the Kings tombs, which those are tombs,
Hmm.
and then they think, oh, well, the Great Pyramid's got writings all over. No, no formal writings at all inside the Great Pyramid. There are some quarry marks, which are quite different. There's a few marks that might have been forged by Colonel Howard Weiss in the 1830s to gin up interest and funding. That's a possibility, but no formal writings at all, certainly inside the Great Pyramid and outside as well. So, isn't
That's
that interesting?
fascinating. Well,
Yeah. Now, you have a car on the inside of your car engine. There's no formal writings. There might be a few part numbers stamped in the castings of your car engine, but inside your car engine, it's not covered with writing because it's a machine. It doesn't need any writing. The Great Pyramid is a great big machine. It doesn't need writing inside of it. So that's a different interpretation of the same direct physical evidence that Egyptologists have. So they say, oh well, it's completely different than tombs, but it's a tomb. So it's Egyptology is in crisis because of their lack of demonstrations and some of their poor research methods that they chose to use.
Well, I find that fascinating. We have to take a quick break, and we'll be back right after this. Y'all come back too. And we're back, and I'm so glad that y'all are here. I have really been shocked by this conversation. And I'll tell you why. Because I have followed this topic, I thought effectively, for years. I find it fascinating. I find the whole experience supporting this um, interesting. And I agree that people who are, through omission even, deceiving,
Mm-hmm.
to be very upsetting, particularly when it is about a world treasure such as King Tut's tomb in the Valley of the Kings and the pyramid. I have actually listened to um, Eric Von Daniken lecture. I've actually gotten to spend some time with him, and he's never he has never said that the Great Pyramid was a tomb, but he has been through pyramids. And something I find interesting, when I don't know if I had talked to you about this the last time we interviewed, but um, he had been in a pyramid in the bottom, and there are pools. And even when they drain those pools, they refill with fresh water. And it is fresh water. It's not stagnant. It's not salt. It's fresh water. And he was so shocked and surprised by that. It showed when he was talking about it. And when I was comparing our conversations, yeah, mine with you and mine with him, I was like, well, he's basically saying that there is fresh water coming into the pyramids. So that's validation, right?
Well, certainly, yeah. The water table on the Giza Plateau and in Cairo has changed through the years and through the eons. But yes, there is certainly some definite links between water and pyramids in general and the Great Pyramid specifically. There was Nile earth found by Sir Flanders Petrie inside the passages of the Great Pyramid. And Nile earth is what he called it, but it's sediment, if you will.
Right.
And Herodotus described the Great Pyramid as being like an island surrounded by water. And up until the 18th century, there was a wall around the Great Pyramid. And we think that that wall impounded water. So you'd have a great big pyramid inside a small lake. So the Great Pyramid was at one time surrounded by water in that regard. And there's also a lot of other evidences that the casing stones on the outside of the Great Pyramid, they are bonded together with a bonding agent that's stronger than the stone itself, and the joints between the casing stones are watertight. So that indicates to me that there's some water related features associated with the Great Pyramid, and there's a whole host of other ideas that indicate water locks were used. Herodotus was told there were machines at different levels used to move the stones to the necessary height. And Herodotus was never told by the priests about any type of big ramp because that idea is unworkable. So there's a lot of things that point towards water and water blocks associated with the construction and purpose of the Great Pyramid.
When you first started paying attention to that and doing your research, what was your first clue? What was the first thing that made you go, I think this is probably going to be something?
Well, at first, it was just an interest. Everybody has are interested in something, might be old cars or whatever, but I was interested in this idea about the Great Pyramid, how it was built, because it's such a monumental structure,
Yes.
and the components are beyond the scope of human back muscles to move in any type of efficient manner. So, but I again read that book, Pharaoh's Pump,
Mm-hmm.
by Edward Kunkel, and I named our foundation, in effect, after his book, called the Pharaoh's Pump Foundation. And anyway, it just seemed so compelling what he was talking about. He didn't have to talk about the Pharaoh's hat or what type of language they spoke, or he didn't have to interpret hieroglyphs or anything like that. He just looked at the direct physical evidence of the Great Pyramid itself to determine how it was put together, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it was quite compelling. He never got the credit that he deserved, but I want to keep his legacy, going and let people know about his research, but also build on it. So that's
Sure.
where I got the idea. Not that the Great Pyramid was a death ray or symbolic in any way. All hydroelectric dams have passages that point up to stars, but that's not the intent of the builders of hydroelectric dams, to have some sort of a vent star correlation. That's just happenstance. So, those vents have different purposes, those passages in hydroelectric dams. So, Edward Kunkel never got hung up in any of that symbolic, interpretation of this structure. It would be as ludicrous as having a symbolic interpretation of the Hoover Dam. So it was very compelling, just as you say that the things I talk about are compelling. What he wrote about was compelling to me, and I'm kind of standing on the shoulders of giants, if you will, for the next generation to build on my research.
Well, I just am. I'm often blown away, whether I'm reading your book or whether, conversation wise, I am just. I've always been told that the pyramids of Giza are based on Orion's belt. And
Yeah,
yeah, you
that's
had
the
mentioned.
story now.
I'm sorry.
I agree. That's the popular correlation story that people have embraced right now. But before that, there was the biblical correlation theory, where people compared data points in the Bible with data points of the Great Pyramid, and then determined, or that they thought anyway, there were correlations between those two sets of data points. The idea of a pyramid inch used to confirm Bible prophecy, and the idea that if you take a certain angle and you can predict or confirm the birthplace of Jesus and that type of thing. So, in not long ago, maybe 60 or 70 years ago, that Bible correlations were very popular. A recent
Interesting.
presidential candidate, Ben Carson, thought that the Great Pyramid was used for some sort of a granary because the Bible
Yes.
talks about big buildings in Egypt that were granaries. And maybe it was like a symbolic granary, but that idea is very pervasive. But now people have come up with a idea about a random grouping of pyramids that somehow have some sort of a relationship with a random grouping of stars in the sky. But the vents, they say, that pointed to those stars because of the precession of the equinox, the sky moves, across, over the eons, across, all the
Yes.
constellations move.
Yes.
Well, those vents don't even point to those stars. So maybe they were trying to tell us that the Great Pyramid had nothing to do with those stars because they intentionally built it so that the vents point away from those stars. So they come up with all these correlations and everything. And am a detractor of that idea, the
Well, it's
correlation.
almost like a romanticism of the pyramids.
Well, it's an idea that was developed using some rather poor research methods, correlations without causation,
Mm-hmm.
comparing two things that sort of look alike and think that there's a relationship between the two. The stars kind of look like the pyramids. Well, I saw a cloud that looked like a puppy dog, but puppy dogs didn't evolve so they can look like the cloud, and the cloud didn't alter its shape to look like the puppy dog. So even though they sort of look alike, there's no relationship between the two. So and then they talk about the Book of the Dead or the King, all of that, but there's no feature specific to the Great Pyramid indicating there's any relationship between the Great Pyramid and the Book of the Dead or any of that. So that theory is kind of in crisis. I make a lot of memes, if you will, put on Facebook, and have a lot of fun with it. But what's interesting is the people that believe all those correlations certainly don't want to defend their position. I ask, is there a feature specific to the Great Pyramid which indicates the original builders intended any relationship between the Great Pyramid and Orion? And they say yes. I say, well, what is that feature? And they say the vents point to those stars. And I say, well, they don't point to them now. So, but they say, well, they used to. And I say, well, the vents, used to point to hundreds of stars.
True.
So if your research method is that they used to point to a star means that it was significant, then all of those stars were significant. Oh, no, not all of them, just the ones we decide are significant. And then they say, well, back when the Great Pyramid was built, it was a religious society, and therefore the Great Pyramid is a religious building. Oh, well, in the 1930s, the United States was very religious. People went to church and read their Bible and everything. And in the 1930s, they built the Hoover Dam. So by that same reasoning, the Hoover Dam is a religious structure. And they go, oh, no. So there's a lot of really poor research methods that's being used to come up with these correlations and that type of thing. So that theory, I think, is in crisis, and it is going to be rejected by most people, just like the Great Pyramid Bible correlations have been rejected by most people, except for a few religious zealots. And there's other correlation without causation theories out there. Phrenology was one. You've seen those ceramic heads that have all those little regions, that have names, like fear or anxiety and that type of thing. And phrenology is the study of the bumps on people's heads and how those correlate with various character traits. And it was taught in colleges not long ago, but it could not withstand the rigors of the scientific method and went away. The phrenology is a cautionary tale of using a bunch of really poor research methods to come up with a story, but then that story is basically hokum, if you will. And the
Hokum.
Great Pyramid Bible correlations are just as poorly conceived as the Orion correlation theory. I mean, they come up with a story, but once you look into it and look into the foundational research methods, then you will find that there's a lot of flaws in that theory. I've done some videos on YouTube
Yes.
about the flawed research methods of the Orion correlation theory, and certainly uh, they have generated a lot of interest. And
I have noticed your numbers on YouTube.
yeah, they're pretty good.
They are pretty good.
Yeah, so I mean, not great. You know, I'm not an influencer by any means, but I've
Well, no,
influenced.
but you are, because you're putting forth ideas that are kind of earth shattering and or faith shattering for some people, because they're so locked in that they're almost afraid to open their mind to a different feel, as it were.
Right,
A different possibility, even not even presented as, well, it is presented as fact, but you know they're not even willing to open their mind just a tiny bit and consider other possibilities. I find that to be kind of universal based on whose ox is being gored. But it's
that's
an
true.
interesting thing, and I have to tell you, I absolutely love the fact that you use the word hokum. I think that's my favorite word, actually. I
Oh,
use it a lot too.
well. I appreciate what you're saying, but yeah, it's the nature of the human condition that once you learn something, you it's very difficult to unlearn what
Hmm.
you think was already true. And there's a million examples of that. A good one is the Piltdown skull. It was a forgery. Somebody made it and stuck it in the dirt. Well,
Yep.
they found it, and the leading anthropologist said, "Oh, there it is. It's the missing link right there." You know, they put it in a museum. They wrote their doctoral thesis on the Piltdown skull, and everything about it, and lectures, books, and everything. Piltdown skull. Well, 40 years went by, and the next generation of anthropologists said, "No, that's a forgery. You can see the file marks right on the jaw and that type of thing." And the
Yes.
reason, the reason why it took 40 years is that first generation of anthropologists had to die off. And the second generation already knew the Piltdown skull was a forgery, but nobody changed their minds. So it's just the way humans think, and it's been true about a lot of things. So a guy named Wagner came up with a concept of continental drift. He was a meteorologist,
Hmm.
and the geologist says, "Oh no, continental drift, no, it doesn't work. It's wrong. Everything about it's wrong." Well, it was quite a few years later the geologists came up with plate tectonics,
Yes.
which is essentially the same thing.
Well,
So,
that's really funny that you brought that up. I was just thinking that because when I was growing up, my grandparents had, I had Encyclopedia Britannica. I had all the learning tools that a kid could possibly ever want in their entire lifetime. There was so much to learn. But they had a globe, and the
mhm,
globe showed the different. I mean, and this was old. This was, well, to me, it was old. It was like 50s to 70s, that time frame,
mhm.
when they got it, and it had the the continental names and showing how they all went together.
Interesting.
And I could not, when I got older and I understood what I was looking at and what I had been looking at, because we always looked at, my grandparents just loved to play with knowledge, right?
Right.
But it was it was probably considered heresy, actually, at that time period. But then again, my grandma was New Age before there was New Age too, so
Oh yeah.
they were
Well, good.
interesting people.
Yes. Well, there's many examples. Another example is there was this guy who was a botanist named Alexander Fleming,
Oh
and
yeah.
he came up with penicillin.
Mm-hmm.
Well, medical community, oh no, penicillin, it doesn't work. We don't need it, and it's too expensive. And it was a huge battle for
Yes.
Alexander Fleming to get this idea of penicillin to be used. And ultimately, the military community, the military kind of said, well, we're going to need something like that because there's going to be a lot of people that are going to need medical care. And they got the ball rolling on penicillin. So it's quite interesting. I like that illustration because I went to Alexander Fleming Junior High, and we learned a lot about that guy and his battle to get penicillin accepted by the medical community. So it's just the way it is. Right now, we're just waiting for more and more Egyptologists to die off, and people, and people who believe the Orion correlation theory to die off, and that'll give an opening for a newer, truer understanding of the Great Pyramid to get past the stranglehold those two groups have in
Yes.
regarding the ancient structures in the Valley of the Nile.
Well, at this point, we're going to need to take a break, and we're going to just put that right here. We'll be back after this message, and we're back. So, I am. There's so many correlations, aren't there, between what was fact for one generation is just obviously misunderstood when the latter generation comes along and has better tools to analyze the material.
Oh, true.
You had mentioned Tesla.
Yes.
And I think that the attacks that he came under and what ultimately defeated him. Yeah, do you feel any pressure of that nature with what you're doing?
Well, Tesla had some excellent ideas. Alternating current was one of them, but what that allowed to occur is they could build a huge hydroelectric dam in one place, right, and provide electricity to, let's say, New York City from Niagara Falls. Mm-hmm. So that was really good for the people that had the money to fund all of that, because everybody that got electricity paid a monthly bill to use that electricity. So he had excellent funding for that project. But his tower up there in New York, the Weidencliff Tower, yes, he had excellent funding until it was determined, there's no place to put a meter for people to pay money, for customers to pay money every month. So his funding stopped instantly, and he was unable to bring that type of technology to fruition because of lack of funding. But yeah, he struggled with that. To be honest with you, we are struggling with funding. We have a nonprofit foundation, but funding has been a struggle. I wish we could get what do they call them, an angel investor, or somebody like the guy that runs Amazon. All of them provide lip service for trying to help the environment and clean energy, and that's what we're about. But it's just crickets. We can't get any type of funding. I struggled to get a printer donated, and and finally did, and that helped. But
So, Soros and Greta have not been helping to get your word out?
no, they haven't really. I mean, in a way, it's a hard sell. It's as hard as a sell as saying bread mold can make sick people well. That's what Alexander Fleming told people. And Nikola Tesla, he said, I can make electricity go both directions in a wire, alternating current. And that was a very hard sell, but he was able to get funding to do that. So, yeah, it's kind of a hard sell to say that this ancient technology can help us in modern times. It's a carbon neutral water pumping system. It is environmentally friendly, no greenhouse gases, if you will. So, but, we're trying to get the word out. People will try to confirm what we're saying by talking to the experts like Egyptologists. They say, oh, no, they just dragged the stones up a big ramp. But funding would be
And
nice.
nothing possibly rolled back over them before they
Oh,
were
yeah.
doing that, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we can't show you how they did it, but that's how they did it all day long. So, but we have a small facility with some tooling. We are making components and sub-assemblies of various scales. You don't need a great big stone pyramid in your backyard. We're designing a system that uses polypropylene containers, PVC pipe, some off-the-shelf parts and valves and other custom fabricated equipment and parts and pieces. But all of that's expensive, it's funding intensive, let me put it that way, but well worth it. And we're working on that, but funding is a struggle. It really is. It's interesting. Some projects, like the Manhattan Project to develop the atomic bomb, certainly there was a need for an atomic bomb, evidently, to kill people, and their funding was infinite. It had no upper limit. So they needed a bunch of copper for the stuff they were doing, and they didn't have copper because of the war effort.
Yeah.
They said, "Oh, we'll just use silver."
Yes,
because
it's so cost effective.
Yeah, there was a big need for it, but I would think that there's a similar need for the direction of research we're following because of global warming, environment issues, and that type of thing. Even an alternative method to generate electricity for all these electric cars they want everyone to have would be important. I know that sending all of our money over to the Middle East to buy oil is a geopolitical, red flag, and funding your enemies is never a good idea. So you would think there'd be a national security issue on what we're doing, but no. I mean, again, we want to develop a system that people don't have to send a check to the power company every month for their electricity. So there's no commercial incentive to fund our research. We're just helping people, so there's no real, no demand for that, I guess, in the real world. But maybe
it's
someday,
tragic, right?
Yeah, being on shows like yours, maybe the word will get out, and somebody will call us up and say, "Hey, how can I help? What can I do?" And there's a lot of ways people can help. They can spread our link on social media and say, "Hey, there's a guy that thinks the Great Pyramid can help people," or they can pray for us, or they can donate expertise. We certainly need our website updated, and we can put a link back to the person that donated their services. People with materials would be nice, or tooling, equipment, power tools, that type of thing. So 3D printer would be wonderful. So,
People don't realize all the details that go into funding research like this.
that's right. Even the electric light bulb, Edison did over 10,000 experiments before we got to the right configuration. People said, "Oh, you wasted your time doing over 10,000 experiments, which all cost money." He said, "No, I didn't waste my time at all. I found out 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb."
There you go.
But
I loved his life outlook. And he was a wit. He was quite the character. But
Edison, yes.
You just cannot do what you're trying to do, what he did. I mean, so many people coming out into this world, like you'd mentioned Bezos with his mass marketing, his mass, basically he's Sears and Roebuck, but on a bigger scale. Everybody bought from Sears and Roebuck. Everybody had the catalog. Everybody had the Christmas catalog.
Mm-hmm.
He's just a bigger scale Sears and Roebuck. And, with a lot faster delivery systems. Thanks to technology that he did not create. But,
right.
It's still brilliant. It's like Musk. Absolutely just the darling of the environmentalists until all of a sudden he bought Twitter, and now he's just like, ooh.
Yeah, it's
bad guy. Not even a bad guy. Still a genius.
It's a strange, strange kettle of fish, all of that going on with Twitter. But Nikola Tesla, another technology he developed was an electric car,
yes.
Except his in the 1930s, he took a brand new Packard, took the gas engine out of it, put in a electric motor, if you will, DC is my understanding, and he ran this electric car, at 90 miles an hour around a racetrack and everything else, but it didn't have a battery. So, but that technology, didn't have the funding to develop.
It didn't have the profit.
Yeah, because if you have a car like that, who's going to make money off of the gas you have to buy? Oh, you don't have to buy gas. So if no one's going to make it, if the wealthy aren't going to make more money, then it's not going to get funded. So
that's kind of a God forbid moment, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is cool. Wait, what?
Yeah,
you don't need us.
Yeah, it never saw the light of day. So that technology, didn't happen for us. We have to buy gasoline or plug our electric cars in all the time and pay to do it. So anyway, it's funny. And then there's other people certainly that have worked on alternative types of systems. There was a guy, his name is very similar to mine, and he developed an electric car, but he was having lunch with his investors, and oops, I guess he got poisoned and died. So
that happens, right?
Yeah, Stan Myers, Meyer, spelled differently than my last name. And I'm Steve Myers. So a lot of people confuse me with that guy or think he's my brother or whatever, but no relation. But
it is interesting, isn't it?
It is. Another interesting thing is there was a guy that was gunned down and killed in the Buffalo shooting that happened a year or two ago in the supermarket. He was the guard, and who would have thunk it? He was working on developing a water-powered car, working on getting some patents. And just all of a sudden, they had a shooting, and this guy got killed. Isn't it a strange world? The one guy in the whole United States working on that type of a thing, and you get my drift?
You probably need somebody watching your six, right?
Well, yeah, evidently we're not far enough along for that type of thing to happen yet. So
That's a good thing.
yeah. But
And
anyway, so it's a strange world, is all I'm trying to say, and we're just trying to redevelop this ancient technology that they used in ancient Egypt to help our polluted and energy expensive world. So hopefully we can get that done, and if not, maybe someone in the next generation can do, then in the future what our ancestors did in the ancient past.
yeah, and this would be when we would go, and we've got our top of the hour break. So everybody, y'all come back too. And here we are. So, we were talking before the the news about the very real risks that somebody who is doing the work that you do take. And I wanted to go back to that because, I do know that historically speaking, anybody who goes up against big oil, just like big pharma, just like big whatever, there are repercussions quite often. And it's something that gives one pause, I think, and it has had the effect of dampening the enthusiasm for getting out in front of a project such as what you're working on. There's a very real threat to changing the status quo.
There is a
And
threat to changing the status quo, and that status quo could be political or anything. There was a threat to changing the status quo of allowing women to vote. That was a huge battle. There was a threat to the status quo for considering that black people were fully human and had equal rights, and that was a battle, and everything. Nothing is easy. They say if you build a better mousetrap, the world will come to you. Well, maybe the established mousetrap company will come and and get you. So, but that's
well,
that's a concern. But I honestly don't dwell on that very much. I
well, you
just
couldn't really, could you? You would never do anything.
No, I just try to conduct research, slow and steady. Try to get the word out on shows like yours. I certainly have a bunch of people that I'm networking with our foundation, but also through email and that type of thing. So, it's been an interesting endeavor. A lot of people my age get a motorcycle and try to relive their troubled youth, but I've got this hobby that has turned into a passion and a life quest, and we're making slow and steady progress every day. So the word's getting out finally. People are considering our research, finding out about what we're all about, reading the books instead of just making some sort of a preconceived assumption. Or people are trying to find out what we're talking about in detail. And people that do that, I would consider to be researchers. And if they read my books, I consider that peer review, if you will. So it's been a rough uphill battle, fighting against the wind, if you will. But we're making progress, and people are thinking, well, maybe the Great Pyramid wasn't built to point to something. Maybe it actually helped people. So we're getting converts every day, and the interest is building.
Well, it should. I mean, I've known about this for, gosh, it was 2019, I think, the first time we spoke.
Yes.
And, you know, the more I learn about what you're doing, the more I understand just how fantastic this is.
Well, I appreciate.
And I hope that it's in place by the time my children, yeah, because the infrastructure for it would have to be built. You'd have to have, methodologies to get from point A to point B. All of that's not unfeasible. We already have systems that can do that type of thing. But the actual implementation, once you get people on board, is not going to be that difficult.
It won't be that difficult. We want to make the technology available without patents or anything, and design it such that people, even in third world countries, can use readily available material, and
Mm-hmm.
in like small workshops build these water pumping devices, use 55-gallon drums or whatever materials they have available. So once we develop the technology, we can spread it that way pretty fast, and then you would of course use that pumped water to generate electricity, right? In a much smaller scale, so it can be either homeowner or community based or neighborhood based systems, and develop your own energy, just like using windmills
Mm-hmm.
on farms, that type of thing. So that's what we think the first phase of this developing this technology will look like.
Well, when I was in Nassau, um, they don't have water available like we do. They have community or neighborhood wells, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people are going to do that, and they're, especially post hurricanes, they're not really fantastic. So, hang on just 1 second.
Oh, that's fine. Oh, your dog? Yeah, they're dreaming, and they're good. Mhm. Oh wow. Oh really? Mm. Oh fun. Oh, isn't that a nice story?
But, I was talking about the people that were there. I was in Nassau the day after Hurricane Sandy left. I had been
Oh,
at sea during Sandy with 30-foot seas. That was an adventure. I've been on bass boats that couldn't stay on plane. I never thought I'd be in a cruise ship that couldn't. So we
wow.
were slapping between the troughs. But
Wow.
yeah, when I realized what it was, it flipped me out. I'm not gonna lie. I was just like, I there was nobody in the hallway as I was going to the ladies' room, and it kept bumping, and I was like, oh, I know that. I know what that is. Oh heavens. So yeah, and then when we went to our room, I was facing the porthole, and you could see the waves that were coming toward us and going past us. They were coming from all the directions. It was really pretty dramatic, and I chose not to, you know, dream of things sinking and stuff. But but when we got to Nassau the next morning and they let us in, I couldn't believe they let us in. We waited until all the other people had gotten their tours and stuff, and we went with a local person that we had been. That's why we waited, and he showed us, the real Nassau with the community wells, and you
Yes.
know we of course went and looked at Atlantis and stuff, but we really just enjoyed experiencing the island with somebody that was proud of it, loved it, and wanted to show it to us. And in
Yeah.
fact, his family fixed us dinner that night. We
Isn't that nice?
It was wonderful. I mean, we paid for it. We insisted on paying for it. They were not going to take money. But it was just interesting to see that these people had limited access to water, limited access to, with all that water in the ocean. There's no desalination
Hmm.
facilities. But, um, you know, the electricity possibilities for them with that much water moving around them were endless. And
Yes. Hmm.
it was just something that when I read your book the first time years ago, that's where my mind went. This would be so wonderful for these small islands, these small communities, people that don't have access,
Right.
but they
And
have
then,
water everywhere. They're
yeah,
surrounded by it.
this technology is quite scalable. You can make it large like the Great Pyramid, but also pretty small for community or for a farm application. And it would be excellent in the South Pacific
Mm-hmm.
island nations, that type of thing. So there's a lot of application for this type of technology, and it's interesting. A lot of people say, well, they got the Nile River right there. They don't need a water pump. Well, that's not really correct, because the water that's in the river is worthless for irrigation. They got to pump it out to get it on the farmland. And
Exactly.
when we were in Egypt just a couple of weeks ago, we saw many pumps, water pumps, mostly floating, that floated on the water right by the edge of the river, pumping water out onto the irrigation. So Egypt has always, in ancient and modern times, needed water pumps. The largest water pump in the world is in the valley of the Nile. It's called the Mubarak Pumping Station, and it's the biggest water pump in the world, if you will. And they are pumping water up into what they call the New Valley Project.
Mm-hmm.
They're pumping it up over this kind of rise in the land and providing water to another area that's certainly not irrigated at all. So again, the largest water pump in the world in modern times is in the Valley of the Nile, and in ancient times, the largest water pump in the world was the Great Pyramid water pump.
Go figure, right?
It's interesting, but again,
Everything old is new again.
yeah, people think, oh, you don't need a water pump because the water is right there. That's like saying you don't need farms because they got groceries right in the grocery store. I mean,
That's very true.
yeah, it's just a funny way to put it. So people, in the United States especially, are inundated and immersed in prosperity, and they don't understand all that it takes to, irrigate farmland, or to have, the power grid or the highway system or even sewer systems. All of those infrastructures are built to provide prosperity. So we think that's what the Great Pyramid was for. It was built to provide prosperity with the pumping of water.
Well, I gotta tell you, that would be so much cooler than the other stuff that you're told us it's
Right.
for.
Well, I appreciate that. I really do. I just hope that we can get, it's fine writing books and magazine articles and doing interviews, but again, we do have our small facility, and funding is a struggle. We are a nonprofit 501c3 organization, and hopefully we can find a angel investor. Jeff Bezos says he wants to give all of his money away, but hopefully some will come our way. But we'll see, and we're doing all that we can with the limited resources that we have right now to work with.
Are you in the process of doing grant proposals and that type of thing?
I've done some, but with no not really much luck at all. No response. And again, if someone wants to donate their expertise and maybe do a much better grant proposal than we have provided, then certainly they can contact us through through my foundation at thepump.org. But there's just so many hours in the day. Do you write grant proposals that don't get a response, or do you write another magazine article to spread the word? So we're doing what we can do, and that type of thing. So hopefully a grant proposal expert will contact us and help us with acquiring some sort of funding.
It's people always just assume that when you have a great idea, the money will follow. But sometimes, especially something that is going to be altering the way that the world looks, it's really hard to get in the door. And
It is.
when you do have people that are so concerned about the environment, you would really think that they would be stepping up a little bit as opposed to, just doing lip service only and flying away in their private jet. But
Yeah.
perhaps somebody who is sincere about this, somebody who truly is an environmental warrior and truly cares, will step up. I
I hope
understand
so.
that John Kerry has a great interest in that. So maybe somebody can maybe call out some of these people that are obviously frauds when it comes to that, and just kind of see if they can't get them to put their money where their mouth is.
Well, I hope. I mean, you would think. Certainly, I'm a proponent of this direction of research. You would think that we would get somebody, that is talented in generating, funding to step beside us and help us along our path. And maybe that'll happen. There's a time and a place that things can happen any time. But we have our information available on the website that people can read about. We have an ability to people can donate through PayPal if they so desire, type of thing. Even though we can give a link back to a donor on our links page or something to that effect. Even mention it on a donor on shows like this to help spread the word how the donor helped us. So but we'll see. I'm just a humble researcher doing the best I can with what I have to work with, but things are coming along on a lot of fronts. We do have a lot of irons in the fire. I'm certainly working on a third book. We just got done with a tour to Egypt, and there's some other things going on. So it's not like nothing is happening.
Well, of course
So
not.
no. So it's we're doing what we can do, but the primary purpose of our foundation is to redevelop these ancient high technologies associated with the Great Pyramid to help our world and the environment that we live in.
Well, I think that's just absolutely noble. And yeah, for those asking, did I just call John Kerry a fraud? Yeah, probably so. But you've got, if you're going to be talking that talk and want to put everybody else into a position, you know, of having to spend money to save the environment. You need to make sure it's cost effective, and you need to be able to make it universal, because not everybody married an heiress and has more money than God.
Yeah,
And
right. Well, yeah, the politicians think the way to solve it is to have carbon credits or whatever that is, or a carbon tax, or in other words, the answer is to pay money. But we're on the whole other end of the spectrum. We want to develop generate electricity,
mm-hmm.
but without making a monthly payment or paying on your taxes or whatever. So it's a whole different end of the spectrum. And but we'll see. Again, we would appreciate any type of donation, expertise. We have a guy that lives down the street who's an excellent welder, and that's certainly much more valuable than an Egyptologist, to say the least, because the welder can actually do something as opposed to Egyptologists. So we do have some grassroots interest and that type of thing. So we'll see. It's funny. The Beatles, they played in Germany, for quite a while. It took them like 15 years of playing together before they were discovered and rose to stardom. So it all takes time.
It does. Well,
For these.
anything worth having takes time.
Oh yeah,
But
it does.
but I tell you, I would be happy to put your information on my website. And I'm not. Fate is not mine. Paranormal Experience and WBHM-DB are mine. And I will be more than happy to put that out there. And I think it matters. And I think that when somebody is working on something that's going to change the world, you help them.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. That warms my heart and means a lot to me.
Well, it matters. You're welcome, but it matters. So, and I am all about trying to help. So, I get.
Well, you're a wonderful helper.
Thank you. Now, we are going to take another break, and then we will be right back. So, y'all come back too. Ta-da! So, yeah, when we left, I had just finished, irritating the entire global elite on your behalf. So, you're welcome. But, what do you want to share that I am not covering here? What am I missing that you feel is vital to get out?
Well, people can find out about what we're doing through the books and the videos and the YouTube channel. But I just got back from Egypt.
Oh, I wanted to hear about that.
Yeah,
Yes.
I co-led a tour with another person, Ramona Miles, and her website is lifealongthenile.com. So she and I worked together and co-led this tour, 13-day tour to Egypt. And it was a blast. I had already been to Egypt, of course, to conduct research and some other things. But it is one of those things, the top of most people's bucket list is to go to Egypt. And we saw the pyramids. We were able to go inside the pyramids and the Sphinx and many temples. And we saw the Valley of the Kings and the Temple of Hatshepsut and the Colossi of Mammon, if you will. Those two great big statues. I read about those.
Yes.
Life magazine and in encyclopedias when I was a kid. And it was the first time I got to see those. We went to Luxor and Karnak, of course. And we were on a 4-day boat ride going down the Nile River. Very relaxing, and got to eat the local food and talk to the local people and toured, like I say, a bunch of temples. So it was a fantastic trip. On my Facebook page, I posted quite a few pictures every day to let
I
people
know
know.
I followed those.
Yeah, it was amazing, amazing. We had some deluxe hotel rooms, which were wonderful. But we got to, be immersed with the people, not just old ancient stone buildings, but got to hear what the people were saying and how it was in Egypt. And we went to the ancient bazaar there in the walled city of ancient Cairo, and um, it was just an amazing thing to do, and we had a great time.
Well, that is fantastic. And
Okay, yeah, we just went to the Temple of Filio, and what's interesting about that temple is it had to be moved in modern times up higher because the water in the Aswan Dam, impounded by that dam, inundated that temple, so they moved it to a higher place. And so the dam's water behind the dam was more important than the original location of the temple, and there were several temples that had to be moved to accommodate the lake behind the dam. So that was something I wanted to mention, that the dam and its production of electricity was of a higher importance than the original location of several temples. It was also more important than the yearly inundation. People say, well, the Nile flooded every year, so they don't need to irrigate. Well, what they did was they built the High Aswan Dam, which stopped the yearly inundation, and then they used that electricity to be able to power irrigation pumps and can irrigate year round. So it was deemed better to build the dam than to rely on the yearly inundation. So that's just some things I wanted to point out. So the High Aswan Dam actually provides electricity for the Mubarak pumping station. So hopefully people that are into infrastructure like I am will look up that Mubarak pumping station. But we had a great time. We got to see just so much of, um, the temples, and we ate the local food, which was delicious. And we toured down the Nile River, and we went to the Cairo Tower, which is sort of like the Seattle Space Needle. You go up on this tower, which was the tallest structure in Egypt when built, and you have your little meal and everything up there, and the restaurant rotates up there like the Space Needle, and it's a fun touristy thing to do. So it was, I recommend to anyone if they have an interest to certainly go to Egypt, and the people there are accommodating to tourists and have been for thousands of years. Herodotus was, in effect, a tourist in the 5th century BC, and he was accommodated just like they accommodate people now, and it was a tremendous experience. We got to go to the Crocodile
ooh,
Museum.
I saw those pictures.
Yeah, that was interesting. There's just and all the temples with the hieroglyphs on them and all of that. It's interesting in a lot of ways, spiritual, political, and other aspects. So it was interesting.
One of the things that I really noticed, and we talked about this before when we were talking about the Great Pyramid being, clear of hieroglyphs, but every other structure, and it didn't really dawn on me until we had talked about that, every other structure that you were around, had your picture taken in or in front of, everything, I mean, there was like no clear space whatsoever that was not a hieroglyph. And it
Right.
was and it was different periods of hieroglyphs. There was, I mean, it wasn't just one era. That was
Yeah.
fascinating to see.
Yeah. Yeah. Ancient Egypt, New Kingdom Egypt, and they had a lot of ornamentation, columns with,
Hmm.
the decorative tops to them of various different styles. But the Great Pyramid has no ornamentation, no formal writing at all. So there's completely different design and structure. So which speaks to a completely different purpose. So that's kind of a theme of the direction of my research.
Well, I'm sure it's exactly what got you, going,
Yes.
that's not right.
Yeah.
Because it would be so different. Because especially if it were, you know, the tombs of royalty, there would be things, describing the splendor of that, person
Hmm.
and the wonders that they brought about in their lifetime for their people and all the
That's true.
things that happen like that when there are, burial places of anyone really,
Right.
you know.
And that's true in the Valley of the Kings. They have hieroglyphs and pictographs that
Hmm.
show the pharaoh smiting the enemy or being cleansed by the gods and all of that, and on and on and on. But again, there's completely different with the Great Pyramid. It's like going to a cathedral. Okay, yeah, cathedral's religious. It's got some symbolic aspects to it. And then going to a hydroelectric dam, you wouldn't, they're so different in design and construction, you wouldn't think that they would have the same purpose.
Right.
And the Great Pyramid is that much more different to the temples as a cathedral is to a hydroelectric dam.
Well, now the other two pyramids that are there with the Great Pyramid, are they of similar structure, and do you feel that they were for the same design, for the same purpose?
Well, they have a similar shape, but completely different interior design and different angles on the sides, if you will, different heights, and also different workmanship. Both of those other two larger pyramids have much inferior workmanship than the Great Pyramid. So I don't think that they were water pumps at all. But my research is about the Great Pyramid. My research is not about are other pyramids water pumps. My research is about the Great Pyramid being a water pump.
Well, I
So
understand that, but I just was thinking that since they were right there with it, and if they're of inferior quality, then perhaps they were designed to be support structures of some
well,
type.
it could have some other periphery purpose.
Hmm.
The pumped water from the Great Pyramid could have been used to build the other two. So you don't need a water pump for each one to construct them. That's a possibility. Another possibility is that they were built in much different time frames. Just because they're next to each other doesn't mean that they were built within a generation or two of each other.
True that,
So
especially
they,
there.
yeah, they could have been built 10,000 years apart by different civilizations. Dr. Robert Schoch, with his research about
Hmm.
water erosion on the Sphinx,
Yes.
indicates that the date of the Sphinx is much older than what Egyptologists say. So that brings kind of an idea that the date of the Great Pyramid and other structures on the Giza Plateau are also much older than Egyptologists say that they were. So it's hard to say. Another possibility about those other pyramids is they could be part of a cargo cult. I don't know if you know anything about that, but in like say during World War II in the Pacific Islands, remote Pacific Islands, these soldiers would come and build like a landing strip and have airplanes and everything else. And the indigenous people thought that they were gods that came with all kinds
Yes.
of cargo. They had spam, they had all kinds of food, they had radios, airplanes, tanks, big ships. And these cargo cults developed, which still exist in the South Pacific mainly. And they try to, they try to get those gods to come back and bring their cargo, if you will. And, let's say the Great Pyramid existed and some pharaohs took credit for it, said,
Mm-hmm.
well, like leaders do, if the economy's good, they'll take credit for it. Or, if the price of gas goes down, they'll take credit for it. You know what I mean? So then there's
Right.
this pyramid and some that might have been there 10,000 years. And some leader of an agrarian society will say, oh, that's mine. I take credit for it.
Right.
Well, then his son says, well, I'm the pharaoh now. I want a pyramid. So then they build it, but with much less precision and workmanship because it's not a machine. It's just like a cargo cult, or it's just a copy, if you will,
Yes.
and that type of thing. So that's a possibility about why those other pyramids exist, and then repurposed to possibly be a tomb. Some pyramids may have been tombs, but that doesn't mean they all were. So that's a whole host of ideas about other structures on the Giza Plateau. There were two matching sun barges, great big, like 150 feet or longer barges or ships that were built to be taken apart. They were like a kit, if you will. And we think they were used in the process of building the Great Pyramid. And when that was done, they took those boats apart and put them in boat pits. One was found in the 1950s, and it was taken out, and they had a little museum at the Great Pyramid that has now recently, like within the last few months, been taken down, and they moved that boat, that was excavated in the 50s to the new Cairo Museum. And the other one has been moved as well. So it was a big deal. You can word search boat pits and the sun barges on Google, and you'll find out all the information you need to know. But why would they need a great big boat up on the Giza Plateau? It's another indicator of some sort of relationship between the Great Pyramid and water.
Yes. That's fascinating.
It is interesting.
Well, I'm going to be Googling as soon as we get off the air, right?
Yeah, we think that they used those were like floating barges. The interior stones are rather small, 2.5 tons, the weight of a car.
Yes.
So they were able to latch a rope onto one of those interior stones, and there were many workers on these large boats. So the workers would move towards the front of the boat, which would tip it, the bow down. They would hook onto one of these interior stones that was on another barge. And then the workers would walk to the back of the boat, and it would tip the boat up and take the stone off of the barge. And then the pond that all this was occurring in was about waist deep, and workers standing in the water would move that barge to where the stone needed to be set down into the pond. So then the workers would again move to the front of the boat and it would move the stone down into the pond. And in effect, taking one of those interior stones off of the barge and setting it in place was done quicker than how to describe how they did it. So our videos, so it was easier done than said.
No doubt.
Yeah. So our video series shows that whole process using those sun barges. Egyptologists say, oh, they had a great big boat and somehow they moved the pharaoh's body, from one place to another. But for some reason, they made the boat so they could take it apart and then brought it all the way up to the base of the Great Pyramid and put it in a boat pit. So, there's different explanations for the same direct physical evidence.
Nothing to see here, right?
Yeah, nothing to see here. It's just something to do with the pharaoh's dead body and all the treasure. Egyptologists kind of remind me of a hammer. If you're a hammer, everything in the world is a nail.
Yes.
And Egyptology got its start from tomb robbers. The early Egyptologists, robbed tombs and took all the stuff to England or France for museums. So if the genesis of your science is to rob tombs and you encounter the Great Pyramid, oh, it's a tomb, but people in ancient times stole the treasure out of it before we could. And therefore, since all the treasure is stolen and there's no evidence for it, that proves it's a tomb. That's the way Egyptology thinks.
Yeah.
Do you know the difference between an Egyptologist and a tomb robber?
Tell me.
An Egyptologist has a college education and a tomb robber don't.
Oh, now I do have some friends who are Egyptologists who are sincere, so I can't really.
Well, yeah. Everybody's sincerity is a very poor research method.
It has been so far, hasn't it?
Yeah. If you're sincere in what you think is true, that is not a good research method at all. The people who believed Great Pyramid Bible correlations, they were sincere. Probably the 9/11 terrorists when they were crashing their airplanes into the towers, they were sincere. So
they were very
sincerity doesn't validate research.
Well, it doesn't, but I can't compare Egyptologists to the 9/11 hijackers either.
I know. I'm just making a comparison about sincerity, not validating what you think is true.
Well, but if you believe it's true and that's what you operate on, you have to be shown that it's not. And that's what you're doing.
That's what I'm doing. Very good. Yeah. So I know Egyptologists, and the largest stone they've ever moved is the one in their kidney.
You're going to get me in so much trouble.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you for allowing me to have a little fun.
Absolutely.
But it's true. They talk about, they have pyramids on the cover of their books and everything, but when, they don't have a good explanation accompanied with demonstrations on how it was done. And people are holding their feet to the fire. And Egyptology is either going to have to change or it will become obsolete.
Well, the main thing is that now there's documentation. And, back in the day, I'd mentioned Von Daniken, but back in the day when he was going there were no real rules.
I do know.
This has been so long ago. But,
yeah, I know what you're getting at. Mm-hmm.
But he was actually going into the tomb, and there was I believe they called it at that point the Queen's
Chamber, yes.
Chamber. And there wasn't really a way to get into it. And they had some sort of a gadget. We would call it like a little robot thing.
Yes.
And they put it in there to see what was in it. And to hear him discuss some of that was really interesting because I didn't even know they had those back then. But it was it was like the first time seeing into it, certainly for him. And
Yes.
yeah, but when he told me about the fresh water in the pools at the in the bottom of the pyramids,
Mm-hmm.
that's when I was just like, oh, wait a minute, how is that possible?
Mm-hmm.
What is feeding that? And the fact that they would drain it and it would just come right back, and it
Oh
was
yeah.
clear, fresh water.
Mm-hmm.
So when I came across you, I and I had those two different but similar stories,
Mm-hmm.
or information that was related. I was just kind of like, it's not stories because they were both true, but it just kind of made me go, oh, wait a minute, this is very similar.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's like a data point that you got from Von Daniken that brought you to mind to the direction of research I'm following.
Mm-hmm.
And that's neat. Yeah, they have robots that have gone up several different expeditions, almost, if you want to call it, that go up the Queen's Chamber vents, and they're made to negotiate past some corners, and they've gone all the way up these vents to where the vents are blocked by the original builders, and they've also drilled a hole through that block to see what was past it, and had a camera and everything, quite sophisticated. So it's interesting. There's
Oh, well,
all,
his was like the 40s and 50s.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
and there's been some in modern times that have in the 1990s that have gone up through those vents with some rather modern and sophisticated robots that are on tracks up the
Well,
Queen's
was it
Chamber.
allowed for them to actually drill through those
Oh yeah,
stones in the vents?
yeah. If you pay enough money, you can do anything you want.
Heck, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
Oh boy. Yeah, they did, and they got permission. They just had to pay money. The people that did the scans that found that void.
Mm-hmm.
You pay money and you can do what you want.
Wow.
So the Great Pyramid is generating money now. So for those people who control it, and it's if you pay your money, you can do your research. So that's the way it works
It's kind of the way it's worked in
forever.
every aspect of research. Yeah,
Yeah,
you pays
that's
your money, you take your chance.
yeah. The research follows the money, if you will. And in science and medicine and that type of thing, pills, it all follows the money. So, but
That's why they keep making more things for us to take.
oh boy, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a pet peeve of mine. You can't watch TV without um, medical pills that are prescribed by the doctor, but they advertise them to us consumers. That's
Yeah.
odd.
Don't
There's
you
only
find it so? I think so too.
there's only two countries in the world that allow that: New Zealand and the United States. No other country in the world allows pharmaceutical companies to advertise prescription drugs to the consumer.
Well, I've often wondered that because I'm not educated enough to make that call.
Yeah, why tell us, about,
Exactly.
and then the side effects, half the commercial on TV is about side effects that are horrific, and so but it's just a strange world that we live in, and it's different. Egypt was different. When I was there just a couple of weeks ago, they devalued the Egyptian pound twice, and the guides we were talking to, didn't like that.
I'm
So
sure.
yeah, it was tough. They also in Egypt, in that part of the world, I'm going to put it that way, dogs and cats are considered unclean, if you will. I'm a dog and cat owner, so I
Yes.
would always ask the guides and the driver, "Oh, I have a dog. It's our pet. Do you have a dog?" They're like, "No, we don't have a dog. We don't have a cat." So, but in the streets, there's like stray dogs that look like they're starving to death, trying to find some shade, under a car that's parked, or you know, uh, beside a building. It's just horrific. I took one. I didn't post it on Facebook, but took one picture. Had 7 dogs laying around, stray dogs. Really sad.
It is sad because we're both animal lovers, and I just
That
can't
was tough.
imagine.
That was tough. And cats as well. Lots of stray cats. Just feral. Walking around. Awful.
Yeah.
That part of it. But that's just me. You
It
just
really
got
bothered me too.
you just got to look the other way. You can't just take them all home. There was one cat I seen. I wanted to take it with me, but you could never, get on
No.
an airplane with a cat internationally.
No.
Uh, so,
But
but that's part of the trip. It's a different world over there.
well, it really is, and I traveled for the first time internationally this year, and I went someplace that I thought was very similar to my home, and in a lot of ways it was, but primarily not so much. I was in
Hmm.
Scotland, and their their values are so much different from ours. There was not a bit, and I'm talking interstates, inner city, countryside, anywhere. There was not any litter.
Hmm.
There was not any graffiti.
Hmm.
There was not any.
Homeless,
There probably were homeless. I don't know. I
but you
didn't
probably didn't see them.
know. But there were people. There were pipers that were playing for money on the street, which I
Hmm.
appreciated because they
That's
were
okay.
brilliant. And there was all kinds of stuff that was cool. So I was
Yeah.
very, but it was my first time, and I was really struck by how different things were. It's very, very civil,
Yes.
very safe feeling.
Hmm.
And I spent several days in Edinburgh um, before we started venturing out to St. Andrews. And well, I spent an hour and a half in St. Andrews, but um, different places. But it was surprising how some
Yeah.
place that you feel will be so similar can be so different, and you were someplace that I'm sure you initially expected to be quite different.
Oh yeah. Well, I
And
knew what to expect. I felt safe in Egypt. When we were out late at night, walking down streets that were for the not for tourists, but for the regular people, I felt absolutely safe.
hmm
But the Egypt, I'm just going to say this, is known for garbage everywhere, if I can say that.
I have
And
actually heard that. Yeah.
yeah, and then kids that were working a lot, trying to sell you trinkets, not going to school, that type of thing, and a few other things that bothered me. But when you travel, you learn a lot about where you're from, if you will.
Yes, you
So you
do.
learn the difference between, let's say, where were you, Ireland and
Scotland.
Scotland? Yeah, you learn the difference between Scotland and the United States. And we have some good things, but the
I'm
United
sure we
States is
do.
perfect. It isn't perfect, and
No place
Egypt has
is.
some good things, but they're not perfect either. And just travel. I forget who said it. I might have been Mark Twain. said that travel is always expensive and always worth it.
Yes.
So yeah, I learned some interesting things. When I got back to the United States, I wanted to get down on the floor of the airport and kiss the ground, but I didn't because the guy behind me would have fell over me. But
That's funny.
that was my sentiment. I people gripe about the United States, and I do too. But boy, I sure love it here. We're
Well, I
not
wouldn't
perfect.
want to live anywhere else.
Yeah, we got a lot of good things going on. So at least for a few days, I didn't complain about politics or the United States after I
Well,
got back from Egypt.
I'll tell you, I have given up politics because I'm a political science major. I love politics, but it's not something you can discuss anymore.
I know
So
it's a shame too,
it is because it's fun.
and it's so important, politics, but it's just become so rabid, and people are frothing at the mouth and all of that, and
Yeah,
you
and I
can't.
don't want to. I don't
No,
want to have that kind of. Yeah, I don't want to have those kind of conversations. I like
no.
to. I mean, I'll always have my opinions. We all have them, but
We,
I will always be very proud of where I'm from,
oh, me
and
too.
just always pray for her. So,
Yeah, yeah. It was, but it was a great visit. I would recommend, anyone going to anywhere. But Egypt was wonderful in a lot of ways because of the exchange rate. Everything was cheap. An Egyptian pound is worth a little less than a nickel. So if you give somebody a £5 note for a tip, that's a quarter, and they were just happy as clams to get a £5 note for a tip. And if you gave, let's say, £60, that's like a few dollars. It was hard for me to get my head around that, the math of it, if you will.
right.
But and they accommodated tourists very well, and um, it was quite an experience, just like you had traveling over there to Scotland. Was it Scotland?
It was.
Yeah.
But I will always be glad I went.
Oh yeah.
But we are literally out of time. I am so. It's gone so fast. But I am so glad that this worked out and that you came on with me and that our listeners are going to have bonus time as they listen to us in our podcast versus live role. And I just think this has been great. Thank you.
Well, it's been fun, and you've let me kind of cut loose a little bit and have some fun. And I appreciate all of your kind words that you've said about me and the research, and your putting maybe a link on your website.
Absolutely.
So all of that is very much appreciated, and I appreciate you tolerating me and letting me be on your show again.
Oh, please. I loved it. I love what you do, and I find it so fascinating. So
Well, thank you.
I just love learning more every time I talk to you, and
Well,
every time you write another book for me to read.
oh, great. Well,
So
people can go to our website at thepump.org, and that is our center for everything about our nonprofit foundation, the books, the YouTube channel, our Facebook page, and you can find out what we're doing, our goals, our mission statement, and all of that. So hopefully people will visit our website, and if they have a question, they can email me through the website.
well, I'm sure you're going to hear from people because how can they not be fascinated by this? I think it's going to be. I think it's just going to be so awesome as this develops.
I appreciate that. A lot of people say that the research is compelling.
It
And
is.
uh, so that's very rewarding for me to hear. So, again, I thank you for having me on your show, Kate, and hopefully we can do this again.
I'm up for it.
Mm.
Always. So, for all of our listeners, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate every one of you. And, I always say this, I'm going to say it again, that if you don't like the world that you're looking at, fix that. Because you know what?
That's true.
You can change it with a seed. I mean,
Well,
I've lived by that. I've tried so hard. And just be the friend you like to have. It's just all it takes.
that's excellent advice.